Okay, good morning, everybody. Bon dia a todos, especially Mariana and Laura. And thank you for inviting me to give a few remarks at the opening of this symposium. I'm not going to give a speech because I think those that know me, I like to bring a couple of things together and maybe mix it a little bit with my own personal experience and how I think it tells the story that I hope is more relevant in Brazil today. And maybe just to start by saying that it's very timely to have this symposium at a time when around the world we're starting to meet again in person. Although this event is online, and we know very well why that's taking place in Dublin and increasingly in other countries, we're able to meet in person. And I just returned last evening from a few days in Rio. And what I really discovered, in a sense, was how much we need to interact with each other, how much we need a type of interaction and a dialogue that we can't have over Zoom because we have to take our turn to speech. But a big part of our life is somebody says something, somebody else comes in, interrupting in a sense. But interrupting is part of dialogue, and of course why we never have a direct narrative. Because if only one person could describe what happened, then there would only be one history, and then we wouldn't have anything to discuss today. So I think that's the first sense I have, that it's very good, but to have it in this format. But we also accept that it's not the same dialogue we like, but we have to compromise a little bit. We're learning how to use this media better, but we should also test each other. And some things I will say you may not agree with. It's not the same as a classroom where we can have a debate, but we can certainly. I would like to start by saying, if there's anything anybody disagrees with what I say, please come back and say it, and because that's a very big part of learning. But over the last year and a half, when we could not travel, and many of us had to stay in our own houses so that we could avoid this terrible pandemic, and I think all of us know people that have died. I certainly know people that have died here in Brazil and in other countries, and we think of them and we miss them. But it also, and this is an interesting thing, a lot of people told me during the first months of isolation that they started to remember things that were lost in the back of their mind, people, occurrences, because they just had time for the first time in life to go back and think about these. And I think of this like some of our great Irish writers like Joyce, who will be discussed during this week, but also Eoin O'Brien, who I've spent some time with when I was in Nigeria, because they left Ireland, but their literature was almost exclusively about Ireland, with one exception. When Eoin O'Brien wrote about Nigeria, everything else was in Ireland. So they went into that space that we experienced, some of us last year during lockdown, when they interpreted their own country from outside as an exile. And I think this is also very relevant to the story of the Anglo-Irish Treaty, because so many people became exiles, especially to America and to Australia. They left at a time of conflict. Many left because they were forced to leave, and they brought that very sharp experience with them, and it was never worn down by time. So the way the Irish struggle for independence is often interpreted from outside is sharper than an experience that's lived in Ireland, when we have become more open and all societies through dialogue and we're speaking to each other. And it's sometimes a challenge to us how other people describe our country to us from far away. And that's because the source of that dialogue is from exiles that have not lived through the last 100 years, but have experienced the story as brought to them 100 years ago. And I think this is, I'm often informed by my other European colleagues that have a large diaspora in Brazil, that, you know, the German people or the Slovenian people or others that are in different parts. Am I still online? Yeah. That they use dialect, they use recipes, they use a type of dress code that nobody uses anymore. They're a little bit locked in the past. And that's wonderful if you're an anthropologist, but maybe a little bit of a challenge if you're trying to deal with modern reality. And in a sense, telling the story of the Anglo-Irish Treaty 100 years later is also something we have to navigate carefully, because some of the difficulties created 100 years ago are still very much alive. We have to put all our resources into keeping the communities at peace with each other in Northern Ireland, keep that dialogue going. So having a very partisan celebration of something that was very divisive at its time is something we have to navigate very carefully. And this has been brought into certainly all those anxieties and sensitivities have been sharpened by Brexit, because Brexit, one interpretation of Brexit is it can only work with an Irish border. The other interpretation is it cannot have an Irish border. And the whole Irish border question, and I grew up 6 miles from the border on the northern side. You know, I know these issues very well, and we have to be careful in how we interpret this. So in a sense, as ourselves in the embassy, when we go into 2022, we very carefully have to think, do we talk about the centenary of Ireland and the bicentenary of Brazil? Because there are certain overlaps, but it's we had a long discussion in the National Library about commemorating Ireland in Brazil this year. And one thing that we all agreed was it was not about one date. There was no war in Brazil that resulted in independence. It was a soft process. And then also in Ireland, the dates of independence are debated amongst different groups, because we had our own civil war after the War of Independence. So for different people, you know, independence came at a different time. And this is why when we talk about 1922, it's actually much easier for us to talk about the centenary of Joyce and Ulysses, because that has a date, that has no conflict. And while we will do both, I think the challenges of celebrating history 100 years later are very real. But I think we are also much better educated as a nation, as two nations, and we have a duty to interrogate the past and to separate the myth from the reality. And I have a friend, Mick Maloney, who's a folk singer, but also a professor of folklore in New York City. And Mick would always start his sessions by saying, the winners write the history and the losers write the songs. And then he has a whole collection of songs written from the perspective of the losers. And I think when we look at where our literature is coming from, often it's the historians write a different story to the literature. But literature is about imagining and reinterpreting, and you can write anything in a song and nobody can criticize it. If they don't like it, they won't sing it. And in literature, you can be critical of that as well. And then maybe just you know, two things because I will pass on and I'll speak again a little bit about Casement in a few minutes, but I think the Irish are basically storytellers rather than writers as such. I'm not talking about everybody, but I felt, when I was with some colleagues during the last few days from Rio, we're interacting by telling stories. And I think there's something we need to understand, because without our pub life, which is where we go to tell stories, I think if two Irish people meet and they're talking about work, they're talking about something that happened in work or somebody in work, but they don't talk about what they do. It's because it's about storytelling, and that energizes each other. If it's a good story, then you pass it on to somebody else. If it's not very interesting, it's lost immediately. And I think a lot of our literature is about storytelling. But for those exiles like Joyce that locked himself in a room, he had to create that story because he couldn't tell it to anybody else. And maybe just the last thing to say is, from my own personal story, my grandfather had, I think, 5 brothers. Some of them were in the independence movement. One of them was in the British Army. He went to France to fight. One of them was in the police because he was 18 and had no other chance of employment. But, and his role was against the independence movement. So I think where his loyalty was, I know where his soul was and his heart was. So all of these complexities make reinterpreting that much more challenging, but also, it's very, very much the reality that we don't have one narrative. We don't have one history. When you see a history of a country described chronologically with dates, I think that's only for students who are doing exams, but it's really unhelpful if we try to understand and grasp the complexity. So I'm really looking forward to this week. I'm going to participate as much as possible. I see that Susan is going to be almost at the end of it, so I'm looking forward to that. I met Mary O'Donnell with you in Sao Paulo. Irish people have to go around the world to meet other Irish people, and this is one of the nicest parts of our job. So with those few words, thank you very much, and I really look forward to everything. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean, for these insightful words on the theme of the symposium, right? So thank you very much, and for sharing your personal experience as well, which is very, very valuable to us. And so I would like to introduce myself. I am Mariana Bolfarine. I am current president of the Brazilian Association of Irish Studies. And I would like to begin these brief opening remarks by expressing my solidarity to the victims of COVID-19 and by thanking all present, especially those with whom I have the honor of sharing this session. His Excellency Sean Hoy, currently Ireland's ambassador to Brazil, Professor Laura Izarra, coordinator of the William Butler Yeats Chair of Irish Studies at the University of São Paulo, and Elisa de Lima Abrantes, Vice President of ABEI. I would like to welcome you all to the second online edition of the 16th Symposium of Irish Studies in South America, the Irish Independence, 100 Years of Perspectives and the Effects of New Policies. This event was organized together with the Fluminense Federal University and the Federal Rural University of Rio de Janeiro. This year's symposium encourages discussions among scholars from Brazil and abroad in order to promote a deep and at the same time multifaceted understanding of the impact of the Anglo-Irish Treaty in the past 100 years. Had it not been for the pandemic, we should be gathering in Rio de Janeiro at this very moment. And I am sure that all of us really miss face-to-face contact. But yet, thanks to technology, we're still able to meet. Apart from the main program, the William Butler Yeats Chair of Irish Studies has contributed with an instigating cycle of dramatic readings carefully planned by Professors Munira Mutran and Laura Izarra with the help of Rosalie Haddad. So thank you very much, Laura, for this. And the Brazilian Association of Irish Studies aimed at organizing events related to research on, as well as the spreading of Irish studies in undergraduate and postgraduate levels, as well as beyond the university walls by way of extension projects. It also promotes mobility programs and the exchange between visiting professors from Brazil and abroad. The outcome of these links between Ireland and Brazil can be seen in the ABEI journal, which has been publishing original research articles and creative writing for more than 20 years. And thanks to the Irish Embassy and the Consulate, since 2018, ABEI has been recipient of the Immigrant Support Program, which endows the association with financial independence, conferring it national and international visibility. Finally, I would like to express my most heartfelt thanks to the local committee organized by Professors Elisa de Lima Abrantes, Vitor Alevato Amaral, and Gisele de Antônio Volkoff. I also thank Vitor Augusto Pacheco for carefully organizing the panel sessions. Although sometimes we might feel that history is a nightmare from which we are trying to awake, according to Joyce, it is moments like this that make us hope for a better tomorrow. I sincerely wish that you all enjoy the next few days of virtual debate with our guest speakers via the ABEI YouTube channel chat. I will now give the floor to Professor Laura Izarra. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariana. Thanks a lot. It's really a great honor to be part of the Symposium of Irish Studies in South America. And I made your words mine to, in relation to all what ABEI is doing and our own position in front of the situation we are living in. But that is the resistance of all of us to face difficult situations makes us continue working together in Irish studies here in South America and mainly in Brazil. So the chair of Irish studies was established in 2009, and since then there is a great synergy with ABEI, with the association, the Brazilian Association of Irish Studies, and we are always working together, especially either at the opening of the chair, ABEI supports the chair, and at the symposium, the chair is also co-organizing and working together. And that is the strength of all of us researchers in Irish studies, so far away from Ireland, but having the great support of the Embassy of Ireland in Brazil and the Consul General here in São Paulo, as well as the support of ESP, that's say the Immigrant Support Program, that recognized the association and has given this independence, as well as founding also the chair's activities. The chair has organized academic as well as cultural activities. And last year during the symposium, we co-organized the Irish film streamings. So this year, that's why we came with this Professor Mutran and Rosalie Haddad organizing this series of Irish plays and also of Irish plays readings that we will have the opportunity to see in translation on the Brazilian stage, the plays themselves, a radio play by Aline, who is a professor in Santa Catarina, and then our own Brazilian actors and actresses that you will have the chance to see. So I won't say anything more. I think that it's the time to enjoy the symposium together. And I would like to thank you, Mariana, and the whole ABEI Association for all this hard work because to prepare this online, as Ambassador Sean Hoy mentioned, we all want in-person events, but nevertheless, we also keep our dialogue going on, at least in a virtual way. And I would like to thank also Elisa, Abrantes, and all the team in Rio de Janeiro who are hosting this event. Thank you very much, and I pass over to Elisa.
Elisa, your audio is off.
Sorry, yes, this technical problems here, or we are still trying to cope with all the things. Well, thank you, Laura. Thank you, Mariana. Thank you, Ambassador. It's a pleasure to be here today, even in this online event. Let me briefly introduce myself. Good morning. My name is Elisa Abrantes, and I'm professor of English literatures in the Federal University, and the Rural Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. And I'm the vice president of the Brazilian Association of Irish Studies. And on behalf of my university and also Fluminense Federal University, represented here by my colleague, Vitor Alevato do Amaral, I'd like to add my words of welcome to those you just heard, and say that it's really an honor for us to host the 16th Symposium of Irish Studies in South America in collaboration with the Brazilian Association of Irish Studies and the William Butler Yeats Chair. And we hope you have a great time here these days for learning, for expanding your horizons in the field of Irish studies, and also having a lot of entertainment, right, with our dramatic readings and discussions, roundtables, plenary sessions. There is a lot to see these days, right? So thank you very much, and let's enjoy the event. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Elisa, Laura, and Ambassador, for all your kind words. And so now we will move on to the next session, which is the opening plenary, the Putomayo Imperative, Roger Casement, Hannah Arendt, and Human Rights by Luke Gibbons. And this session will be held in a different meeting, okay? So a new link is going to be generated, a new YouTube link, which will be posted on the program. And very briefly, we will meet again. So thank you very much. And I wish you all an excellent few days. See you soon.